Welcome back to the channel. It's Saturday. We've had our live stream. Now it's time to talk about the very best comic books that you could read this week. And here with me, as always, is Drew from Comics Lead. How you doing, Drew?
Doing great, Wes. Got a new bookcase. I'm tired from moving all morning, but let's talk about some great comics.
Well, I can just say this up front. Mark Millar is living his best life. He's hot as could be. Who would have thought in 2023 he'd be the hottest comic writer in the entire industry? But that's how it is. We got two Mark Millar comic books to talk about first. First up, Nemesis Reloaded #4, Image Comics, Mark Millar, Jorge Jimenez. Absolutely sterling issue once again. This time we've got Nemesis taking on another police officer that may have had something to do with his upbringing and the tragic things that have happened to him as he keeps embroiling in the mayor of LA and really bringing down the heat of the city and all of the destruction and mayhem that's going around him. And once again, we get another really big reveal at the end.
The way this opens up, if you're familiar with the story of V for Vendetta, how it plays out in the opening of it, it seems eerily at first, but then Mark takes it, he just puts it into overdrive, and it goes into a much darker place than where Alan Moore took it. But yeah, I love this issue. The only disappointing thing is that there's one more issue, and then that's it. And then who knows how long it'll be before we get the next Nemesis volume. But this was honestly more entertaining than the last volume with Steve McNiven and Mark, but almost 15 years ago. This was a blast, and each issue, the intrigue, the mystery gets only deeper with this new mysterious missing president of 1981. I want to know about this. This is pretty flippin' interesting, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Strongest recommends this week for Nemesis Reloaded #4.
And I'm definitely going to miss Jorge Jimenez illustrating a Mark Millar script because it feels like Mark Millar writes scripts specifically designed for Jorge Jimenez to absolutely shine. They're brutal, they're barbaric. He gets to do great action scenes and all that stuff. It's going to suck to see Jorge Jimenez have to go to lesser writers in the coming months.
Chip Zdarsky. Yeah.
His Batman is not very hot right now.
Yeah.
We have one more Mark Millar comic book to talk about, The Ambassadors #2, Image Comics. Mark Millar, Carl Kerschel is the illustrator on this one. And I love Frank Quietly, but I will say I appreciated the art better by Carl in this particular issue of The Ambassadors. Really cool story here, and I like what he does here. It's a deeply personal story as he introduced a couple of more ambassadors that have been chosen. Specifically, we get to learn about the Indian ambassador. I think he has a really cool costume design, and it feels like this really personal story, and he's going back to visit his parents at the end after he's had all of his training. And it feels like so deeply connected to this one character. And then in the very end, it blows up and opens up the entire world to the story he's actually telling. Could not have seen it coming, and I can't believe he executed it like that.
Yeah, I love this issue. And I really want to know with Mark when he was doing, because each issue is going to have a different artist. Issue 3, completely different artist as well. And I want to know if he went in with each script for each issue and felt like Frank is good for this one. This guy's good for this one. That had to have been him. He had to have been planning this out ahead of time, which artist was going to do what. Because the artist on this one, he did a damn good job. And like you said, we get the superhero of India, and we see his backstory, what happened to him. We see him learning to use his powers, how they work, and we get a bigger personal twist for him as well. And I really love that twist. The ending for this was really good. It reminds me of Willy Wonka to a degree, which was brought up in issue 1 as a throwaway line, kind of like a little Slugworth reference. But it's fine. I can go with it. It makes sense in what's going on in the story. Yeah, strong recommend for this one. Mark Millar, firing on all cylinders. He is the best right now in the biz.
So you feel like Charlie in the glass elevator with Willy Wonka realizing the world is much bigger than you realized starting today.
Bullseye. Just no Gene Wilder. Yeah.
Miss Gene Wilder. I was watching See No Evil, Hear No Evil today.
Oh,
absolutely brilliant stuff.
That's a good one. Another great one is Stir Crazy. Great one. Richard Pryor.
Absolutely. Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, match made in heaven. Let's get back to the comic books. This is something I didn't think I would be recommending. 007 for King and Country #1, Dynamite Comics. Philip Kennedy Johnson with Giorgio Spalletta on the art here. I actually checked out the first issue of the last 007 book Philip Kennedy Johnson wrote, and I did not like it. I specifically did not like the art, and I didn't like the story all that well either. So I was very surprised how much I liked this when they changed out the artist. It looks a whole lot better, and it feels like Philip Kennedy Johnson is a lot more comfortable telling a James Bond 007 story. We pick up right where they left off in the last story arc, but it gets a whole lot more interesting because it appears that 007 James Bond is a traitor, at least according to MI6 and other organizations out there. This thing is just really action-packed. It's really fun. This is what I want from a spy action thriller comic book. I was really surprised I liked it so much.
I'm a big James Bond fan, born and raised. I got the novelizations and the adaptations up here on my bookshelf now, too. But after I got done reading this, I'm like, I don't know how I felt about this, because it felt like Bond was kind of passive in this book, and I wasn't a big fan of that. And it reminded me a little bit too much of the latter Daniel Craig films, which I don't like in any way, shape, or form. But this one,
Casino Royale?
No, Casino Royale is great, but when you put it in the context of what happens in the latter films, it's hard to go back and watch Casino Royale when you know where the journey ends. And it's like, it's leading to that. It's like, it's tainted. It's tainted now because of that. But I may try to reread it to see what I think now, but after a week. But it was okay. It's better than the Danny Lore stuff from like 4 or 5 years ago. I'll say that.
And it's definitely better than the previous volume by Philip Kennedy Johnson, in my opinion. So we shall see where that goes. We're also going to recommend Barbaric Hell to pay number 3 Vault. Michael Moriarty, Nathan Gooden, probably my least solid recommendation on this one. I'm not really sure what Michael Moriarty was thinking. He decided he didn't actually want to tell the Owen Barbaric story. He wanted to tell the Soren story. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of taken over the comic book. So when we get to Owen in Hell, I'm enjoying the story. I just wish he had his axe with him, because that was the pairing that made the comic book a lot of fun. But the art is still very spectacular. We are getting a little bit of Owen on a journey in Hell, which I really don't want to see this story. I want to see something more exciting and more fun. But I still like the concept. I still like the art. And hopefully we will drop the dead weight of these stupid other characters. And if Michael Moriarty likes them so much, he will write them their own solo book and not tie them into something that people actually like.
Bullseye, you hit the nail on the head. That's what Kyle and we said the exact same thing. I'm not reading this story for them. I really don't like these characters. I mean, to me, they're not that interesting. They're not as interesting as Owen is. They're not even like a degree. They're not even like as interesting as the Blade is. And but you said the best part is the art. The art is beautiful. It's terrific. It's a shame it's wasted on a script like this. And I've kind of noticed the same thing going on with Death Dealer, where they have like some filler issues focusing on other characters. I'm like, I'm not reading it for these guys. I'm reading it for Kerr. That's who I want. But I'm hoping we shift back into gear and we get everyone back to where they need to be, like in the first few issues that came out. So yeah, like you, for me, this was probably my weakest of recommends this week.
There's only one more issue to go in this miniseries, and hopefully we'll have the real team back together, and Michael Moriarty can set those lame-ass characters aside, and we can actually do some fun stories again. You have a couple more recommendations. You are on the Jeff Lemire bandwagon. Phantom Road, number 2, Image Comics, Jeff Lemire, Jordi Belair.
He can do no wrong either right now, relatively. It's Mark Millar and like Jeff Lemire. These two, the last 2 years or so, they've been firing on all cylinders. As soon as you get them away from the big two, they're amazing, especially Jeff Lemire. Although I will say Robin and Batman was terrific as well. But this one, yeah, we learned more about the mystery of this new dimension realm part of wherever they're at. They're on Earth, but they're in a different realm where they're at. We learn the rules, what they have a task to do, but there's also some physical setbacks. Like they try not to do it, something happens to them. But the mystery really deepens with this, and Jeff Lemire is like his approach to this is like very Hitchcockian. I'll say that, where he's telling you what he wants you to know when you need to know it. And we're knowing just enough right now to get by to the next issue. And I like that. It's not everything all at once. So, yeah, I do have to recommend Phantom Road. This is a terrific read by Jeff Lemire.
Speaking of Jeff Lemire, you said Robin and Batman. Let's talk about the artist that he worked in there. Dustin Nguyen, who's been illustrating Jeff Lemire's work for a long time. Little Monsters, number 12, Image Comics. The dynamic duo are back together again.
Yeah, so with this issue, we're getting closer to the end, it feels like. Because it feels like everything is really coming to a head at this one. So humans and vampires have been mostly, at this point in the future, they've lost their humanity. And both, effectively, when you read the story, both are monsters at this point. But which monster will really come out on top? And I really do like that, what Jeff Lemire set up here, where it's like the humans are just as brutal, barbaric, nasty as the little vampires are, the little monsters are. And it's very true in the story. And I love that. I dig it. You guys need to be checking out Little Monsters. If you love vampires, you love kids, you love little vampire monster kids. post-apocalyptic stories. This is a terrific read, guys.
I hope that you're all indie comics fan, because that's pretty much the recommendations that we do have. We have one more comic book to talk about, but it's pretty much an indie comic showcase this week. Our final recommendation is from Marvel Comics. We have nothing to talk about from DC. It absolutely sucked this week. Moon Knight number 22, Jed MacKay, Alessandro Cappuccio. I'm very much in the same thought of mind regarding this series as I was for Barbaric Hell to Pay. I've really enjoyed Moon Knight for quite some time. Every time since we've gotten to issue number 12, it feels like Jed MacKay is going to take Moon Knight in a new, solid direction. It ends up not going there, and he does nothing for a couple of issues. Kind of frustrates me, and then he teases something else and doesn't do that. This is the last time I'm going to recommend this goddamn comic book if it doesn't find an actual through point for the goddamn story that it wants to tell, but it still looks amazing. Alessandro Cappuccio's art is very, very good. But this really isn't even a Moon Knight comic book. This is a Tigra comic book. I could give zero fucks about that character, but it is executed well. If you like Tigra, I think you will like this a lot. If you came for Moon Knight, you're probably going to be disappointed, as we are still searching for an actual direction for the comic book, but it still looks good, and I don't want to give up on it yet. That's what I'm saying. And
I really want to, reading all these issues up to this point, and being a writer myself, I'm willing to bet you he didn't know where to take the story. He had no idea where to go with the story, and just started doing little vignette stories along the way until he came up with an idea where to go. But yeah, like you said, this is the Tigra show, and if you love Tigra, you're gonna love this comic. But if you came from Moon Knight, you're gonna be sorely disappointed, especially with the ending, which I've been thinking about the ending to this all week, and I'm like, I don't buy this. I don't agree with this at all. The twist he did with Moon Knight. But yeah, I will say, if you like Christopher Kent Wrightwell's Iron Man series with Hellcat and everything, here you go. You'll appreciate this. But yeah, this is another. We're winding down toward the end of our recommendations for this series. I don't know if I can ever recommend another issue until he finds a focal point where he wants to go with the story.
I'm on my last straw on this one. I've gone as far as I can with actually recommending the comic book. It still looks like $1 million. Figure out what you actually want to do, because it's clear he had a story to tell that ended with issue number 12, and then he's been aimless for 10 issues, i.e. basically a year now. If you don't have anywhere to go, shut it down and let someone else take over the goddamn character. I imagine this will be the last time I'm recommending that comic book, because it doesn't sound like it's going anywhere fast. But we did have a ton of great indie comic books to recommend this week, and I do want to say thank you very much to Drew from Comics Late.
Thank you for having me here. I love it. Yeah, I love talking about great comics when we get them.
You're not going to be at WickedCon, right? You're not going to Boston?
No, I will not be up in Boston. You'll have it near the Mosh.
No legal seafood?
No seafood, no clam chowder. Nah.
We've come to the end of the road of the latest comic book recommendations video. We've been doing this for quite some time. And if you've like, Wes, I just needed a few minutes more. It just so happens YouTube likes to look at the way that you view videos and likes to look at the way I create videos, and came up with this as the perfect video I created just for you. You need some more Thinking Critical? Click on it right now.